All right, here we go. Notes. Here we go, starting. No, don't interrupt. If we have a line like this is a linear line. We just learned about our graphs of sine and cosine. This is a graph of sine. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Now there's a big difference between these graphs. A linear line, it goes up, and if we draw a nice horizontal line here, we're only going to cross one time for our graph. And that means that whenever we try to solve a linear equation, we're going to be looking at one answer. Now, the other type of graph you've done before is a quadratic graph. And how many answers do those have? 2. But what happens if we draw a line like that for our sine graph? We have touched it at this point 4 times, and this graph keeps going up and down. And so how many times have we touched it here? Actually, we will have made an infinite number of intersections. And since we're solving trig equations with sine, that means this equation would have an infinite number of answers. Now that's a little weird to think about because it doesn't mean that every answer is right. There are still way more wrong answers, but there are an infinite numbers of right answers. So let's do a quick little warm-up. Again, our goal today is to go kind of fast. If we're solving this question, there's only one pile of x's, so our goal is just to isolate that and kind of move it around. I would do -2, -2, 3 equals 3x. I would divide by 3, divide by 3. 1 equals x. We expect one answer, we get one answer. Nice, excellent. The domain for this graph is all real numbers, and the range is all real numbers, and whatever. Now, the other question is asking us about our domain of the sine graph. Welcome back.
Hey,
42, you're a minute late.
that person who had the phone, they found it. They were outside looking for it. But
Good news.
Apparently someone stole it, though. The person who had it in here stole it from the girl.
Who found the phone?
I found it.
Don't worry about it, it's nonsense. We're doing notes, remember. The domain is all real numbers. The range is from -3 to +3, and so we would write it like this. Remember, when we did the secant and cosecant graphs, we didn't write the range like that because the secant and cosecant graphs were either above or below. But now we're going back to sine and cosine, and the y goes in the middle of the 3's because the graph is in the middle of the 3's. There's your 3, there's your -3. Okay, now, how many answers to these equations? I guess I want to make it so that we can see the graph and the questions at once.
Is that an all?
Yeah, it's the all real numbers, meaning
2 R's?
it's all real numbers. If you've never heard of it before, then just, I'll tell you later. All right. This says 3 equals 3 sine x. Well, here is 3 sine x. And so when it says 3 equals 3 sine x, this first 3 is the y value of 3. And so how many answers should we have? Now, we should have an infinite number of graphs. If they're talking about just what we can see, we can see 2 answers. No, that's not useful answers. All right, how many answers can we see for the y value of 1? Well, if we kind of come across here, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. We can see 4 answers. But again, there are technically an infinite number of them. And then for 0, 1, 2, maybe we can only see 3. It doesn't, but there's an infinite number. And -2, 1, 2, 3. We can only see 3, but again, there's an infinite number of them. The real interesting question is this last one, which is -4 equals 3 sine x. How many times does our graph get down to -4? For this one, it would be none. Now, as you can probably imagine, we're gonna flip it over. We're running into an issue where is every question supposed to have an infinite number of answers? Is every question like, this doesn't really seem like that's how math is supposed to work. And so when we get questions, like on the back, you'll notice that there is a little ending piece here that says 0,360. So what that means is we're gonna look for only the solutions between 0 and 360, which is degrees. In pi, in radians, it would be from 0 to 2 pi. Notice that we have the bracket on the 0, which means 0 does count as a possible answer, but we only have a parentheses on the 360. That means 360 does not count as a possible answer. That could be a little bit of a tricky question. You might see one of those on a quiz, something like that. So let's solve this question. It says 2 cosine theta minus 3 equals -5. Now, first of all, when it comes to solving trig equations, if you know how to solve algebra equations, there is 0 new strategies, 0 new difficulty. Everything is exactly the same. If this cosine here is really scaring you, if you're thinking to yourself, oh, this looks really hard, what you can do is just write the question again and just put an x instead of the cosine. It's the same exact thing. We're just gonna treat the cosine like the x. Now, what's gonna happen is probably even by the time we get to the next question, you're not gonna be doing that anymore because it's a little annoying to have to write everything twice. But if you're still feeling a little nervous, the cosine is exactly like the x. There's only one x. We want to get the x by itself. All the same rules apply. So -3, what do we do with this -3? Add it to the other side. 2x equals, when we add 3, we get -2. All right, what do we do next? Divide by 2. X equals -1. Now, we're not finished with this question, okay? We did the algebra. This was algebra 1. This was so easy. This is literally the first 5 days of algebra 1. I know that we turned the cosine into the x to make our brain less stressed out, but this question is still supposed to be a cosine question. You can't just delete the cosine. So once we get here, if you want to replace it with an x, you have to make sure you put it back into a cosine. So I'm gonna put the cosine back. Cosine theta equals -1. Okay.
So it's like we're pretending the cosine is
It's a cosine the whole time. If it scares you to look at a cosine because the cosine is 4 letters instead of 1, you can just make it an x, just for like a pretend little x, so that you're less stressed. But you always gotta put it back. Now, what we've done so far is only algebra 1. We have not done any trig yet, and so this is not the answer. All right? What this is this is the end of the algebra, and now it's time to do the trig. The question says cosine theta equals -1, and your job is, so what's theta? Right? We've done questions like this before, where we were given cosine theta equals -1. You need to tell me the angle. It looks like they want degrees because they've listed that the answers need to be from 0 to 360 degrees. So where on the what do you say? 270. Right. Where on the unit circle does cosine equal -1? You said, hold up.
180.
Is it 270 or is it 180? It would be 180. Goodness. Theta is equal to 180 degrees. Now, we saw the graph before. Technically, there's an infinite number of these answers, but we only want the answers between 0 and 360. Is there only one answer for this question? For this question, yes, there would be. Now, if it didn't say from 0 to 360, it would be infinite answers. But because it says 0 to 360, remember your graph for cosine looks like this, and it is only -1 one time at 180, right in the middle. Okay, let's go faster because the reality is there's no new information here. It is algebra that we already know, and then trig that we already know. So let's do the algebra first. It is 2 sine x minus 1 equals 0. This sine x, don't let it stress you out. It's one package, it is the x, and so just move the rest of the stuff. So what's our first step? Add 1. 2 sine x equals 1. This time I'm deciding not to do the replace because it's really not that bad. What's our next step? Divide by 2, 1/2. Now remember, this is not the answer. This is the end of the algebra. Now it's time to do trig. If you think about your sine graph, remember it goes up to 1, down to -1, and so 1/2 would be right here. I expect to find 2 answers for this question, not 1. So, this question said x, this question wants degrees and not radians. I'm looking for 2 degrees, 2 angles. The sine of 30 is 1/2. Very good, 30 degrees. Sine is positive in the first and second quadrant, a smart trig class, and so 150 is the other one. And those are our 2 answers. Perfect. Hello?
Coach, I made you get 60.
Sweet, come on in. What are you doing, lunch right now?
Yeah.
Alright, sit there for 1 second, I'll tell you. You just following him around? What, you brought a whole crew of guys?
Oh, no, you got heels got pizza.
Okay, cool.
Mr.
Just hold up.
Can you go up?
No. We're going faster. Alright, we're doing this question. It says 3 sine x minus 2 equals 5 sine x minus 1. Now, this time we have multiple signs, but remember, it's gonna act just like a plain old boring x. So if you want to replace these with plain old boring x's, because 4 letters is a little scary, 1 letter, now it just looks nicer. Solve it however you want. Maybe we subtract 3 to the other side and we get 2x. Maybe we add 1 to this side now and we get -1 equals 2x. Then we divide by 2, x equals -1/2. Swap it all back in. This should be sine x, not just an x. This is not the answer. We're looking for when is sine -1/2. It's gonna be 2 answers. The answers are 210, 330.
When you subtracted 2,
I subtracted 3, 5 to make 2. I added 1.
because they like terms.
Yeah. All right. Question number 4. If that was easy, do question number 4. As you can tell, that's the last question on the notes.
You guys filled out the clarification form.
X equals
You guys have it.
square what? No, because these are
All right.
just
Do this for me.
what happens to the list? And
You gonna
when
send it?
that's
I'm gonna put it up right here.
Is it too? It's too, yes.
Where you get it?
I think it's.
So like, where is the artist? Do that with your where is the
Because that's one, so it's just. So it'd be
Did you like?
Yeah, I can put it in just columns,
And y'all right here.
Because anything go positive, between positive is go positive or negative.
Wait, what are the tangents? Square root of 3 over 3.
One and then square root of 3 over 7.
1 and 4 cosine.
What is it?
Should only be like a minute.
It's been a little slow getting people to sign up, so if you know people that need to sign up, they can do it. Right now, it's like 10, like close, like we need at least 30, like 10 right now.
Yeah.
We got a whole week left, but people need to sign up. Alright. No, you guys are good.
Alright. A little bit of a distraction, but it's always nice to pass some time to do your own questions. We got some square root type scary stuff. 3 tangent x minus 2 square root 3 equals negative square root 3. Our 3 tangent x is just like a 3x. We have this negative 2 square root 3. Now, if we have negative 2 square roots of 3 and negative 1 square roots of 3, those are like terms. Those can be added together. So if I do plus 2 square roots of 3 and plus 2 square roots of 3, I'm going to have 3 tangent x equals positive 1 square root of 3. Then I want to divide both sides by 3. Tangent x equals square root 3 over 3. Now that's not the answer. I'm still looking for all the intervals where this becomes true. Or sorry, not all the intervals. All the angles where this is true, using degrees from 0 to 360. If you have your unit circle, it has the cosine in the x position and the sine in the y position, but it does not have the tangent. So I kind of taught you guys this little cheat code that I like to think about the tangent as the square root of 3 up here at 60 and the square root of 3 over 3. And so my first location is 30. What is the other location?
210.
Nice job, 210. Cool, so think about this for a second. Algebra-wise, nothing new. Using the unit circle, also not new at all. So, even though these questions might scare you for a second, if you ever start a question and you get nervous, just take the whole 4-letter tangent and just make it 1x. Then it'll look a little bit easier, then you can solve it. You got a question?
So is cosine the only one that only has one answer?
That is a good question, and it is maybe misleading the way that these questions looked. Let's say I asked you this question: when is cosine x equal to 1/2? Cosine, which looks like this, is just like the other ones, almost always gonna have 2 answers, 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 2 answers. There's actually only one place where cosine has 1 answer only, right? It's the same with sine. Sine almost always is gonna have 2 answers, 2 answers, 2 answers, 1 answer. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1 answer. So most of the time they're gonna have 2 answers. But sometimes if you're at all the way to peak, quadrantals, you might have only 1. Good question. All right.